Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This is episode 66, where I'm going to be answering your questions about a range of different subjects regarding strength conditioning and sports science in boxing and combat sports. In this week's episode, we've got a range of different questions: how to prevent shoulder injuries and also shoulder endurance issues, what squat variations are best suited for boxing, and also how to avoid mental burnout in boxing. And we've also got a range of different questions as well. Before we get into this week's episode, I'd like to ask you a quick favour. If you're not a subscriber to our YouTube channel yet, hit that subscribe button so you support the growth of the channel and you don't miss out on any future content. Okay, let's get on with this week's episode. What ways can boxers prevent and recover from shoulder impingement injuries and shoulder endurance issues, especially in lead hooks and jabs? So this is quite common in boxing. How to try and prevent injuries of the lead shoulder and also to try and improve shoulder muscular endurance. First of all, the reason why the lead shoulder gets a lot of injuries, a lot of endurance issues is because it's used a lot more and a lot different to the rear hand. So the lead hand is used more of an arm punch rather than a rear hand, because basically with the rear hand, you've got the trunk rotation adding into it. It almost comes through as a whip, and the shoulder doesn't really get used towards that back end. It almost comes all the way from the lower body through the trunk, and then the arm is quite relaxed until impact. Whereas the lead hand is not supported as much through rotation, even in hooks, but particularly when we're using it for jab. It's only like a little bit of a rotation, but it's more of an arm shot rather than the backhand. Also, it's used a lot more often. It could be a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio between the lead hand and the backhand usage. And actually, in recent fight statistics, looking at Bivol versus Biev, they use their lead hand 70 to 75% of the time rather than their backhand. So almost like 3-to-1 ratio using competitive scenario. Whereas like a lot of the drills are often lead hand only. A lot of the sparring, lead hand only. The lead hand gets to use a lot more. So this is a reason why this becomes quite tight, because it's used more of an arm punch and also it's used more often. So this is why we end up with shoulder impingement issues, because we end up being quite tight in the anterior complex, tight in the traps, and not as developed in the rotator cuffs and in the posterior shoulder complex. So what we need to do there is start to use some mobility drills to make sure that we're working on external rotation, working on overhead range of motion as well. Look to do some soft tissue release work in the pec area to try and increase that range of motion, and then also try and improve the strength of the posterior shoulder muscles. Reverse flies, single arm reverse flies, prone T-raises, and also some overhead variations, TRX Y-raise, and prone dumbbell Y-raise as well. You can also do some banded face pulls, some band pull aparts, everything to just target the posterior shoulder muscle. We can go a little bit more bespoke, a little bit more complex, but from a general rule of thumb, most boxers just need to increase that range of motion and to try and improve the strength of the posterior shoulder muscles. So improving the mobility and stability around this shoulder joint can help prevent injuries, but it can also help reduce muscular endurance issues. We can reduce the activation on just a single muscle. So this anterior shoulder complex here is getting overused a lot because of the lack of activation and strength through the posterior shoulder. So this is why you see a lot of boxers struggling with that shoulder muscular endurance. Another reason would be because of strength issues, because even though that the shoulders are well developed, they can't be overloaded as much because of the shoulder range of motion, shoulder stability, affecting the amount of load when doing strength and conditioning exercises. So this is why at Boxing Science we look at helping improve strength, because this will obviously help improve the health of the shoulder joint, will help improve punch power, but can also have a good impact on shoulder muscular endurance. The reason why the shoulders aren't as strong is because they are not loaded up as much because of the limitations of training the shoulders. Because most boxers have a limited range of motion and overhead stability, they can't get the right amount of load to try and improve the strength of the shoulders. So this is why at Boxing Science we take a very strategic approach by using some landmine variations In this way, we can overload the shoulder without compromising that shoulder joint or looking to compensate in any way. We also do some overhead variations where we might do some seated dumbbell press, some seated overhead barbell press, and also doing some single arm dumbbell pressing from a half kneeling position. We also can look at improving muscular endurance a few different ways. We can do some supersets where we're doing a pressing exercise with a more isolated exercise, let's say a shoulder press paired with some lateral raises. And then also we can look at doing some BFR exercises, so blood flow restriction training that gets the muscles burning and then can help improve that strength endurance and that perception of fatigue in the muscle. So there's a few different things that you can do to help improve muscular endurance of the shoulders and the arms. Number 1, improve range of motion. Number 2, improve strength and stability around the posterior shoulder. Number 3, improve overall strength. And then target some strength endurance activities such as drop sets and supersets. Then also using some blood flow restriction training to help improve and get you used to feeling that burning sensation in the shoulders. Next question, front squats versus normal back squats for boxing when both techniques are already learned. So this is a really interesting question because the front squat has a lot of benefits, especially when you think about the limitations of the back squat in boxing. Bar being front loaded, this is increasing core activation and also reduces the amount of loading going through the spine. And we know that this can be even more of an issue with boxers with the high training loads that they have, but also their tightness around the hips, lean forward during that back squat. So this will increase that loading going through the spine. So you'd think that we'd be pushing more boxers to do front squats. However, even if the technique is great, boxers are going to find it really difficult to get into this front rack position due to shoulder health, shoulder stability, a lot of imbalances between left and right, but also the wrist action here. We're getting a lot of wrist action here, a lot of strain going through the wrists, and the hands and wrists get a lot of strain anyway through their boxing activity. So the last thing that we want to do is increase that overall strain on the wrist that can have an impact on injury and also can have an impact on their boxing if they're feeling strain through their wrists and then going and punching the next day. This isn't going to be beneficial to their overall boxing performance. With the front squat, it's quite difficult for me to find a justification to put that front squat in there. I've trained boxers doing the front squat before. The elbows are just way too low. They're leaning too far forward to actually get the benefits of that bar being front loaded. However, front loading the squat is something that we do at Boxing Science, but we just do it in different ways rather than the front squat. We do the goblet squat and different variations of that. And then also we use a landmine squat as well, due to them benefits of being front loaded, greater core activation, more vertical going through the squatting action. And also with the goblet squat and also with landmine squat, there's some variations that you can do that can transfer to strength, speed, and kinetic chain sequencing, such as doing the landmine squat to press, doing that with bands, can link up the lower body, the core, and the upper body, all sequencing in one generic action that can transfer towards kinetic chain sequencing during a punch. Even though that these variations are good for beginner and intermediate athletes, I still be wanting more advanced boxers and athletes to be still using the back squat, because this is where we can truly start overloading that squatting action to get them strength adaptations. But we still have them limitations in place where we might have an imbalance between left and right. There's a large eccentric loading that can end up leaving an athlete sore, especially when they're in a calorie deficit and high training loads, where they're boxing and high intensity conditioning activities. And then also with their mobility issues, they might end up leaning too far forward, especially when they're going into deeper ranges of motion. So when we use the back squat, we use variations of the back squat, such as the box squat, Anderson squats, and also squatting with bands to try and reduce the load at the bottom end of the movement and to increase acceleration and speed throughout the squatting action. Hopefully that's answered your question. Front squats versus back squats. I'd still be using back squats, but there is variations where we are doing front loaded activities such as the goblet squat and the landmine squat. This question is around core training and how often that you should do it. I've seen boxers do core and ab work in the morning. Is this something that boxers should do every day or a specific amount of days across a week? At Boxing Science, we place a huge precedence on improving core strength and stability. I think that core training needs to be part of every single strength and conditioning workout. At Boxing Science, we do this twice a week, but then we encourage our boxers to do at least 2 core circuits at the end of their boxing session every single week, maybe edging up to 3. So just to try and increase that muscle mass, retain that muscle mass around the trunk, because we know that this is the biggest contributor towards punch force. And we also know that rotational core strength has a huge predictor of performance on the landmine punch throw. We make this as a key physical element that we need to keep involved with the program, not just the 2 strength conditioning sessions a week. We're trying to do this multiple times across the training week. An easy way to do this is to just add on a core training circuit at the back end of your boxing workouts, making sure that you're hitting them 4 key areas, which are anti-lateral flexion, anti-extension, anti-rotation, and hip flexion with neutral spine. In this way, we're going to have a more balanced core, and we can do this in a 4-stage circuit, doing 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, or doing it for a rep range between 10 and 15 reps and doing 3 to 4 sets. And you can do it with equipment. So here's some variations here, or you can do it body weight only. Either way, you're making sure that you're hitting that core strength and stability between 4 and 5 times a week. And this will help improve that core strength, core endurance, and also help maintain and retain muscle mass of the trunk, which we know is a key contributor towards punching force. On a plyometric tier list, where would you put skipping rope and why? This is a fantastic question and something that we've talked about quite a lot on the Boxing Science YouTube channel and also in our plyometric workshops that we run on our Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshops. So that's now available online as well. So there's 3 types of plyometrics that we do as part of our tier. Right at the very top are intensive work, drop jumps and really advanced pogo drills. The rep range for the intensive work is between 5 and 10 repetitions. Then we've got some extensive plyometrics, low intensity, low load, but we're looking to try and optimize that ground contact time. This is stuff like low pogos, banded pogos, bar assisted pogos, and our coordination drills such as like the ladder work. And we're looking for rep ranges between 10 and maybe even 30 contacts in a single set, especially when we're doing the ladder work. And this is classed as extensive because we're doing more than 10 repetitions. A lot less intensity, but making sure that we're optimizing that ground contact time to keep it between 140 and 200 milliseconds. With skipping, this is more or less submaximal, and this can provide a strong foundation for you to do plyometrics from. So we couldn't do the intensive work without the extensive, because this provides a strong foundation for us to maintain a very short ground contact time with plyometrics, with increased demands of force demands and speed demands. And then we couldn't do the extensive work if we haven't got the base foundation of submaximal contacts. And this is what we get from skipping. Every boxer that ever comes with some sort of plyometric issue or Achilles problems or anything like that, we ask whether they do skipping and how often they do skipping, because this can provide a really strong foundation for them to do plyometrics from. So even though we take a very new school approach in improving footwork and speed and coordination, we also have the old school approach as well in mind to build them foundations to work from. So definitely I'd say for boxers to do skipping, I'd encourage boxers to be doing 3-minute rounds for 1-minute recovery and be doing this 2 or 3 rounds before they get into each boxing session. So doing this 5 times a week. So this next question, quite interesting and very important. How do I avoid mental burnout in boxing? Now I'm going to answer this as best as I can. 1, I'm not a competitive boxer. And 2, I'm not a sports psychologist. I've spent a lot of time with boxers over the last 12 years, and I've seen like the psychological strain that a big training camp can have and kind of the setbacks that can come about as well. So I've seen athletes that I've thought that might be burnt out, but also from a coach's perspective as well, it's very prevalent in elite coaches. And a lot of the work that I look at in terms of burnout in coaches is done by my colleague, Dr. Pete Olusoga that has done plenty of work for boxing science in the past. And his PhD is actually on burnout and mental well-being of professional coaches. And one of the studies that is out there is that 40% of elite coaches have shown some mental health decline or burnout symptoms. This is a huge representation on coaching. I think that athletes often get burnout as well. Things that can happen during burnout, devaluation of your own performance and your own perceived performance. So your self-esteem and self-confidence might be knocked as well. And then also thinking like, kind of, what am I doing this for? Easy things that you can be doing is to try and build up that confidence, try and build up that self-esteem by having a reflection on past achievements and your current status, seeing where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and having a reflection on that. And then also looking at what your personal values are as well, your personal values and your goals going forward. Burnout can come from actually your personal values clashing with the culture around you. So a lot of blame is on you during burnout rather than actual the culture, let's say, of the sport. And let's say if you've lost a fight or not got a fight coming up and you're working tirelessly in the gym without them end goals. This is where I see a lot of athletes burning out in the gym. What I'd say is to make sure that you have a reflective process to keep on top of your self-confidence, your self-esteem, making sure that you're still working towards goals and you're still hitting goals, and have a perception of how far that you're coming, how far that you're progressing in terms of your boxing journey. And let's say if you're doing some strength and conditioning, having a look at your fitness levels, seeing how they progress, not only this training camp, but how have they progressed over the last year or 2 years. And this kind of reflection on how far that you actually come from and how much that you are actually progressing can start building up that self-confidence. And then giving yourself some new goals, changing up the routine a little bit, can help improve that motivation as well. Obviously, it's very good to be making sure that you're having some downtime, making sure that you're not just sucked into all them goals, having some mindful breaks, whether that's reading, watching telly, socializing, making sure you're having a mental break as well as a physical break from your training. I think that's really prevalent. And I think that sometimes even in coaching and working in business, your mind can always be on what you need to be doing next, what's happened at work, what needs to be done for the next week, rather than trying to take your mind totally away from it. That isn't just going to happen naturally. You're going to have to put some strategies in place to be able to take that. So these are all little things that can end up building up to having that burnout. But I think essentially what you need to do is to make sure that you have that self-compassion, that self-care, to be having a reflection of your values and your achievements and your progress that you're making. I think this is the best way of avoiding burnout in boxing and in coaching as well. Easy for somebody like me to just say, either just keep going and keep going. And a very easy thing is just like, have a break, have a few days off, go and take a holiday. But once you soon get back into the bubble of coaching and training, that burnout is going to soon catch up on you as well. So having some reflective processes, having some self-care processes as well, vital in keeping on top of your mental health and also avoiding burnout in athletic performance, competitive performance, and also in your coaching performance as well. This is questions from an MMA fighter who's recovering from shoulder surgery and was having lots of shoulder dislocations. Which exercises should I focus on? So first of all, with shoulder dislocations, if you're really struggling with this, having surgery, I would say to be looking to get some advice from a physiotherapist or sports therapist, because each case is individual. But from a general point of view, exercises should be focusing on creating some stability around that shoulder blade. So we need to be working on some banded exercises first to create some activation patterns through the rotator cuff muscles, to create some strength, muscle activation, to create a stable shoulder. Then you look at some exercises that will challenge stability. Two key exercises that I love to do, a Swiss ball figure of 8 and also a bottoms up kettlebell press. Obviously doing this with lighter loads if you're just coming back from surgery, and then be doing like exercises that can create some real stability around the tendons and ligaments in that shoulder joint, doing some isometric work, half kneeling, isometric shoulder press, or that's a horizontal press, creating some strength and stability through isometric exercises. Longer form isometrics, this is between 10 and even 30 seconds per RPE, so rate of perceived exertion, between 3 and 5 out of 10. Before sort of moving on to your more maximum force, 8 or 9 out of 10 RPE. Do that and then start building up some strength with some light loaded variations of the landmine half kneeling press and some shoulder exercises as well. Looking at developing strength around the posterior shoulder complex, doing stuff like reverse flies, band pull aparts, and different banded face pull variations as well. So these are the things that I do. Just look to improve the activation of the posterior shoulder muscles first. Start challenging strength and stability through various exercises such as banded pulls and Swiss ball figure of eights and bottoms up press, and then look to try and improve the strength with different variations of lifts, but also using some isometrics as well. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of episode 66 of the Boxing Science podcast. Thank you very much for watching or listening to our podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so don't miss out on any future content. And thank you to you guys that have sent in your questions and making the episodes. If you're wanting your question answered on the next episode, look out for our pre-podcast post where we put out a Q&A post. Add your question into there and make sure that your question is answered on the next podcast episode. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Hopefully see you on the next episode of the Boxing Science podcast.